Good afternoon. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. And with that, I'd like to call today's regular council meeting to order. Council, are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing nothing from council administration, are there any changes to today's agenda?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, administration is proposing to add 10.2 under closed session as legal negotiations.
Okay, thank you, CAO Panasic. Are there any other changes?
That's it.
Okay. So to council then, Councillor Haas.
Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'd like to make the motion to add the 10.2 legal negotiations to the closed session.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor, are there any comments, discussion or debate? Okay, seeing none, if we could see that motion, please. Motion to add 10.2 under closed session legal negotiations. Council, if there's no further comments or questions, please vote now. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, council, with that, if there's no other changes, we would look for a motion to adopt. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we adopt the agenda for September 5th, 2023 as amended.
Thank you for that, Councillor Haas. Council. There's no comments or questions. If we could see the motion, please. Motion to adopt the agenda as amended. There's no comments or questions. Please vote now. And that is also carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to council minutes for adoption 3.1. Council. Councillor LaBerge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we adopt the minutes for the regular council meeting, July 31st, 2023, and the committee of the whole meeting, August 8th and August 22nd, 2023.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor, are there any comments or questions regarding the motion? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, there's a minor change. The August 22nd agenda under council absent, it says none. But there was at least one. Stuart Taylor was absent. Possibly two, because there's only 5 councillors present.
Okay, thank you for that.
As a big
Councillor.
guess that Councillor 2 might be Joanne Race. August 22nd.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Taylor. To administration. Process to deal with that.
I've captured it and I'll change it in the
Okay.
and update the minutes.
So for council's purposes, we can consider that amended then. Okay. Okay, anything further from council? Okay, seeing nothing then. The motion that council adopt regular council meeting minutes from July 31st, 2023 and committee of the whole meeting minutes from August 8th and August 22nd, 2023. And if there's no comments or questions, please vote now. It's not showing up for you, Councillor LaBerge. Okay. You're in favor, Councillor LaBerge. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to citizens minute with council. Are there any citizens here today who would like to address council? Okay, seeing none, are there any citizens who have requested to address council via Zoom?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then, delegations and presentations, which we have none today. So that moves us to our first action item 6.1, resignation of mayor. Administration.
Thank you, Chair, to the rest of council. On Monday, August 28th, Mayor Marcel Michaels provided the acting Chief Administrative Officer, Alicia Borbeau, his official resignation. As per legislation, section 161, his resignation becomes effective on that date received by administration. And the CAO has an obligation to report the resignation at the first council meeting following that resignation. So that is what we're doing here today. We're recommending that this simply be received for information.
Okay, thank you very much for that, CEO Panasic. I'll go to council, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the council accept the resignation of Mayor Marcel Michaels for information. And if I just briefly may speak to it.
Yep, go ahead.
I just honestly, in short, with, in trying to keep things brief, I'd like to thank the former mayor for his time and his service over the years. It's greatly appreciated, and I look forward to dealing with the excitement of an upcoming by-election. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Magoon. Council, are there any other comments or questions? Seeing nothing from council, then if we could see the motion, please. There is a motion before us that council accept the resignation of Mayor Marcel Michaels for information. Council, please vote now. It's not coming up for you, Councillor Race. Okay, Councillor Race, are you in favor or opposed? In favor. Okay, and that's carried unanimously as well. Thank you, council. And yeah, just before we move on, I do want to just take a quick minute on behalf of council to thank past Mayor Michaels for his service to the community. 10 years being involved with council in Hinton, 4 years as a municipal councillor, and then the last 6 years as mayor of Hinton. And so I just want to take a minute to wish former Mayor Michaels the best of luck in his future endeavors and his new career path as he has taken on the Chief Administrative Officer role in the village of Consort, Alberta. So thank you, Mayor Michaels. That brings us to our second action. Oh, my apologies, Councillor LaBerge.
Thank you. I just got a note from a citizen who said the live stream isn't available.
Okay. I think we'll call a recess for a few minutes then and see if we can get that straightened out. So we'll take a short recess. Thank you. Okay, it appears that we have our technical challenges figured out and everything should be working well now, so we will reconvene at 4:12 PM. We were moving on to action item 6.2, appointment of returning officer to administration.
Thank you, Chair. Following the resignation of Mayor Michaels, the town of Hinton is required through the Municipal Government Act to fill the vacancy through a by-election. As there is more than 12 months remaining until the next general election. We are proposing that for this by-election that council appoint Charlene McDougall, Legislative Services Clerk, as returning officer for the 2023 Town of Hinton Municipal by-election.
Great, thank you for that, CEO Panasic. To council, are there any comments, questions, or motions? Councillor Haas,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that council appoint Charlene McDougall, the Legislative Services Clerk, as returning officer for the 2023 Town of Hinton Municipal Bylaw or by-election.
thank you, Councillor Haas. Did you want to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, are there any comments or questions? Okay, seeing no comments or questions or debate from council, if we could see the motion, please. There is a motion that council appoint Charlene McDougall, Legislative Services, as substitute. No, I don't think that's right. Still the wrong one. Oh, that's okay. It should be the recommended action. That's on page 13 of the council report. That's still the wrong one, though. I believe that's the motion that would pertain to 6.3. We're on 6.2. No, that's still the 6.3 one.
Sorry, something's not showing, even on my system, like it's not showing me where I can record your vote on there. So, do you want to just
Do
do
we
it?
need to recess again or?
Through the chair, yeah, I believe we're having a glitch in the system right now. We can either do it through the show of hands or if we could recess just to try and fix that issue. From our side, it looks like it should be going through, but we might need a second to figure this one out.
Okay, we will recess again for a brief period to see if we can get that straightened out. It's important to make sure that that it's recorded properly. So we'll recess for a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, we're back again, reconvene at 4:20 PM. And we do have the motion before us now that council appoint Charlene McDougall, Legislative Services Clerk, as returning officer for the 2023 Town of Hinton Municipal by-election. Council, if there are no comments or questions, please vote now. Everybody else is in, just you, Councillor Taylor. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. That moves us to action item 6.3, appointment of substitute returning officer administration.
Thank you, Chair. We are also recommending that council appoint Alicia Bourbeau, Director of Corporate Services, as substitute returning officer for the 2023 Town of Hinton by-election.
Thank you very much, CEO Panasic. Council, any thoughts, comments, questions, motions? Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move that council appoint Alicia Barbeau, Director, Corporate Services, as substitute returning officer for the 2023 Town of Hinton Municipal by-election.
Did you want to speak to it?
I do not want to speak on this, but I do have a question. So we're doing a substitute returning officer so that there is always somebody in-house when nomination papers arrive. Is that correct?
Administration?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. Amongst the other duties of the returning officer, just to ensure that we do have staff on hand to carry out those obligated duties.
Thank you, sir.
Anything further, Councillor Race?
Nope, good.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor, are there any comments, questions, or debate? Okay, seeing nothing from council, there is a motion that council appoint Alicia Barbeau, Director, Corporate Services, as substitute returning officer for the 2023 Town of Hinton Municipal by-election. Council, if you could please vote now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, council. There's nothing further on that. That would bring us to action item 6.4, setting 2023 municipal by-election date to administration.
Thank you, Chair, to the remainder of council. We, after the resignation of Mayor Michaels, we do have a responsibility to hold the municipal by-election. The Municipal Government Act dictates that if council does not set an earlier date, that it must occur 120 days after the resignation. That date would land on December 26th, being that's a holiday and not very conducive for many people. We are recommending that council make a motion for an earlier date. The recommended action that you have in front of you being October 23rd is the earliest amount of time that we could fulfill all of our legislated duties. The other thing to take into consideration is that if a member of council did want to run for mayor, that gives them very little time to submit their resignation for this. So if there was some interest, and maybe just in respect to council, if we did want to postpone this for a little bit longer, just to give council enough time, because it is a requirement to resign for that period of time, and that would just give council enough opportunity to make that consideration, make a thoughtful decision if that was the wish of any one of any other members of council. But the shortest available date would be October 23rd. If council did want to provide some additional time, one date that we did look at as administration that would work well was the Thursday, November 16th. As a date that would work well for at least for administration, but we're open to other dates if that works as well.
Okay, thank you, CEO Panasic. To council, are there any comments, questions? Councillor Magoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. December 26th, worst Christmas present ever. I do have a question about, and this will sort of indicate what I support. In the interim period, the question of quorum. Is quorum determined by the number of sitting councillors, in this case, 3, or does quorum stay steady at 4, as was set by the initial number of councillors and mayor?
Thank you for that, Councillor Magoon. To administration.
Thank you. Through the chair to the remainder of council. Note the quorum will remain at 50% plus one of the sitting members of council, including the chief elected official, which is at this point in time Deputy Mayor Stashik. So the quorum will change if there are resignations.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question, if we were to go with the recommendation And then and the counselor at the table decides to also run as a mayor, for mayor. Does that then look at 2 by-elections potentially at a cost of $17,000 apiece? Question meaning is if we were to extend it into the November 16th date, that would give plenty of time and we could possibly run them together and reduce the costs.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Administration.
Thank you, through the chair to Councillor Haas. That was my understanding and why we wanted to push it in, because if we do it, we can still post this date, but if any member of council did decide to provide their resignation at any point in order to run for mayor, then the clock would start all over again. And just because the dates that is included here in the recommended action doesn't leave a lot of margin for error, then the clock would restart for another by-election for councillor. So if we just gave a little bit more leeway, we could accommodate for any sitting councillors who may want to run, and then we could just run one by-election instead of 2.
If I may. To follow up on that, because my understanding is that we set aside either over the next 4 years for the next election. So this money is coming from corporate services budget that I see. So it's not coming from an election budget. It's coming from a separate budget. So, my preference would be to get a better bang for our buck. And if we could postpone it or push it out a bit, then it does give an opportunity to have both elections at the same time if a councillor steps down or resigns. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Taylor.
I don't quite understand, like the deadline for nomination day looks like it's September 25th, right? You could announce before that, but that's kind of the deadline.
Through the chair, that's correct.
So if somebody announces the September 25th and they're on council, then we don't know that there's a vacancy September 25th. And that just gives 2 weeks to November 16th. So that's more than enough time to have an election for both the mayor and the councillor in that 2-week period. Because if the clock starts over again, then it would start date of resolution for the election, which means that it couldn't be till the end of November. That's the part I don't understand.
Administration.
Through the chair to Councillor Stewart, the clock would start because I believe, and I'm looking to Ms. Bourbeau on how much lead time is required before to set the day before the nomination. If you could clarify.
So from the point that my apologies. From the point that council sets the election day, we have to back it up 4 weeks to nomination day. Nomination day closes at noon, 4 weeks preceding to election day, but we are required to have that 2 full weeks of community advertising so that we can properly advertise the positions that are vacant, giving all members of the community an opportunity to put their name forward should they want to be on the ballot come election day. So that is the kind of the impact in not having it sooner is those 2 weeks of election days. So you're really looking at a 6-week window at minimum. We can start accepting nominations the minute council sets the election date, but that true nomination period is 2 weeks from the nomination date, which is 4 weeks from the election date or prior to the election date.
So if I could request a little bit of clarification, then it's legislated in the MGA that nomination day is 4 weeks before the election day, regardless of when the election day is.
Through to all of council, that is correct. And there's a specific form that must be filled out and advertised in the community newspapers showing all of the positions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I apologize for seeking clarification. I'd just like to be very sure on this. So an election day, as recommended of October 23rd, that does or doesn't, please just clarify it for me, give us enough time if a sitting member of council also wanted to put their name forward and had to resign, that still gives us enough time for that potential scenario to happen within the October 23rd timeframe?
Administration.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I could, I believe if that were the case of October 23rd, that the resignation would have to be submitted by this Monday. So it is just a very small
Yeah, I'll back out and see if anybody else has any questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Magoon again.
Okay. Well then, seeing no other questions, I'd like to move that council declare Monday, October 23rd, 2023 as the date for the Town of Hinton 2023 municipal by-election. And if I can just speak to that, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm certainly open to the thoughts of other councillors. I just wanted to make sure that what this period of time gives us a chance to have all scenarios encountered with one election, that we wouldn't have to have a separate by-election if a member of council decided to run for mayor. So provided that we can have a sitting member of council also run and that fit in that period of time, I would support that, which is why I'm making the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Okay, so I guess I need clarification because I didn't understand that could be possible to have both elections with the October 23rd date. So is that the case? If we call the 23rd date, then I heard that an existing councillor would have to resign by Monday, which then would allow both elections to occur on the October 23rd date. Is that the case?
Yes, through the chair, it would have to be by Monday, September 11th, that the councillor would have to resign in order to run for the mayoral election.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. My apologies. Just before I go to everyone else, I'm sorry, I do need a little bit additional clarification then. Can a sitting councillor do they not have right up until the nomination day to file their paperwork if they choose to? So theoretically, if October 23rd was the date set, do they not technically actually have until September 25th to file their papers?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. But if they file the papers on nomination date, that means that we would have to restart the clock on the councillor by-election, which we would be required to do, which would have to start that 2-week consultation period and then the 4 weeks for nomination. And Chair, if I could, but I may have been mistaken on the 11th date. So I just want to be clear and refer to Ms. Bourbeau to confirm that the 11th would be the resignation date. Alicia, if you could.
Sorry. I just want to open this up. Yes, the 11th would be in order for us to post correctly the positions that were open and the number of vacancies in the paper on the proper form. So the 11th being a Monday, we have to submit to the community newspaper by the Tuesday for publication on Thursday.
See, open ASIC.
Thank you. So Chair, if I could, any councillor does have the right to submit their papers on the nomination day, but just in respect for the amount of time and resources to hold a by-election, we would ask that council, if they were interested in running for mayor, that they do comply with the the 11th date, that would require resignation. If, you know, in respect to the position of council, and this is a big decision, if council or councilors did want additional time, I would look to council to possibly set a new date that would give some additional time for council to fully flush out that decision, if that was the will of council.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. That helps quite a bit. So technically, a sitting councillor, or anyone for that matter, has until the 25th to file paperwork, but to be able to hold the by-elections concurrently, it would have to be, they would have to resign by the 11th so that they could meet the appropriate notice periods.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm tiny bit confused. At the beginning of this conversation, you spoke to why we should have this in November to add a little bit extra time. Can you go over that again?
Through the chair, I was just providing an alternative option if council did want to provide the council with additional time and the community with additional time to make this decision on whether or not they wanted to run for mayor, whether that be a member of council or the community. But the October 24th just being a tight timeline, decisions for everybody would have to be made relatively quick if we wanted to hold the by-elections concurrently.
May I continue, please?
Mhm.
So what I'm getting from this is if we move it into November, that would give us our 2-week timeline for mayor, 2-week timeline for councillor. It wouldn't be a fast, crowded situation, right?
Through the chair, yes, it would provide everybody with some more time.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, my preference is to not have it fast and crowded, and to give council people enough time to make a decision and go out and talk to people and see whether they think they should run or not run, and only have one election. Whether we actually fill it on November 16th or October 23rd, I don't think it makes materially that much difference. It's still not as bad as December 26th. That's my preference.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas.
Thank you. And I've already spoke to, and I think doing the math, you know, I think, I think being as how the nomination date ends on the 25th, we have to be fair and really allow everybody that amount of time. And if we hold the proposed November 16th, that then gives from the nomination date when it closes, if a sitting councillor decides, it would then allow enough time for all the advertising and everything to happen, and then we can run them consecutively. And I think that's, you know, financially, I think that's responsible. It gives more time for people to consider. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. For myself, the one consideration I had based on time was simply the amount of time that council would essentially be down potentially 2 or more people, which of course impacts quorum. And I think it puts us at a bit of a disadvantage in case any other sitting councillors have any personal issues, sickness, illness, those sorts of things. That being said, I would agree with you. I don't think an extra week or 2 would hurt. So in this case, I would simply move to withdraw and then find a date that's more amenable to all of council. I think this is one of those things where you want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Magoon. So council, we do have a motion to withdraw from Councillor Magoon regarding his previous motion. So council, is there any comments or questions or discussion regarding the motion to withdraw? Okay, seeing nothing from council, then if we could see the motion to withdraw previous motion, please. Okay, we could probably do that one manually then, that's fine. Council, any opposition to doing this vote manually? Okay, seeing no opposition from council then, Councillor Magoon has moved to withdraw his previous motion. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. So that previous motion is withdrawn. Councillor Taylor,
Yeah, I'd like to go with a motion that council declare November 16th, 2023 is the date for the town of Hinton 2023 municipal by-election for the reasons previously stated.
okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Did you want to speak to it any further?
Well, we previously stated the reasons, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, we do have a new motion before us then. Is there any comment, question, or discussion regarding the new motion? Councillor Magoon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification then, so that we understand what that forgive the term, that deadline date would be, to have concurrent elections, by-elections, pardon me. What would be the last date that council and administration would need to receive a resignation of a sitting councillor for? Again, because we certainly don't want to see an additional election following up on that.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Administration?
Through the chair to council, that date would be October 5th at the latest.
Okay, thank you. Council, is there anything further regarding the motion? Okay, seeing nothing further from, sorry, Councillor Taylor, sorry.
Oh, I just want to check that date's a weekday, right? Yeah, so we're okay. Thank you. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. I believe that's a Thursday. Yeah. Okay, council, is there anything further on the motion? Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, sorry, the motion, oh, and it disappeared. The motion that I just saw didn't have the date in November on it, but it's disappeared for me.
Okay. And we'll just give it a minute for the motion to come to us. Is there any other comments or questions though in the meantime? Okay, seeing nothing further from council then, if we could see the motion when it's ready. Okay. There is a couple typos in there, but that's okay. I'm sure that'll get rectified. So there is a motion that council declare Thursday, November 16th, 2023 as the date for the town of Hinton 2023 municipal by-election. Council, are there any comments or questions before we call the question? Okay, seeing nothing from council, please vote now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Is there anything further on item 6.4 before we move on? Okay, seeing nothing from council, we'll move on to action item 6.5, amend the town of Hinton signage standards manual. Administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will delegate this one to Deborah Juker, Director of Community Services.
Thank you, CAO Panasic, and through the Deputy Mayor to the rest of council. This item is proposing council adopt several amendments to the 12-year-old Town of Hinton Signage Standards Manual, primarily to provide for a standard for interpretive signage in Hinton parks and trails. The amendments were reviewed by Committee of the Whole on August 22nd and referred to a future meeting of council, and are presented today just as text, sort of a list in the RFD before you. The amendments in brief are to remove a street blade sign standard that's no longer used, and to repurpose an interpretive sign family created for a special project in Happy Creek that was never used. This repurposing will create a whole new sign family called interpretive signs, providing specifically for a multi-panel sign for major interpretive displays, a one-panel sign for moderate size displays, and moving a interpretive sign from a different part of the manual into this sign family for minor interpretive displays. An example of how straightforward this kind of amendment will be is on page 70 of the agenda today. It's primarily just renaming one section of the manual to be used throughout the town of Hinton. And why this is important is currently the town has interpretive signage in many locations that have been quite ad hoc in their design and implementation, and they don't really have a coordinating design. The former green square sign is an example of this diversity, but of course we also have some rocks that are engraved. We have cast bronze plates. We've got different interpretive signage in different places. A sign family with a coordinating design will allow some cohesiveness across the town of Hinton for interpretation. Finally, it'd be great to welcome the black metal silhouette banners into the manual. And other than that, there are a few miscellaneous amendments in the RFD listed on page 2, mostly to update the paint specifications. The ones that are there are out of service, as it were, and remove the sign maintenance practices, which really belong in a Parks and Boulevard operating standard and need to be fleshed out a bit more. To have the manual professionally updated, administration proposes utilizing a small amount of existing contracted services operating budget as available. And so with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that, Councillor Taylor.
Two things. One, by and large, I really do like the wood and the signs that we have, so it seems to keep that theme going. I think that's very attractive for a town. And two, do these standards present like status quo basically, or they significantly change the costs of our standards? Are there significant costs to this, or is this just sort of the way we've been doing things with minor changes to costs or no changes the way we've been doing things?
So thank you for that question, and through the chair to the rest of council. Currently, we're doing whatever seems best at the moment with interpretive signage. This kind of standard is great in two ways. One is it brings that cohesive design that I'm talking about. They're roofed in most cases, the major and the moderate one are roofed, which means they're longer lasting. They're also made of post and beam, and that's a more workable, sort of an in-house feasible structure to work with. Whereas things like rocks and metal, they take specialized contractors to install and to maintain as well in most cases. But wood is something we can work with ourselves. And so I think that the operating costs will be the same and no significant increase, potentially some decrease as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council? Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I'll go with the recommended action that council approves the amendments to the 2011 Town of Hinton Sign Standards Manual as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Did you want to speak to it at all?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, we do have a motion before us now. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, seeing no one with any comments or questions at this time, I do have one question. In the report, it does indicate that peeled log posts and the wayfinding sign family will be coming to a future committee meeting for further information and discussion. Is that conversation going to focus solely on the peeled log component, or is that a review of the entire sign bylaw? And how would that be incorporated?
Thank you, Chair, and through to the rest of council. That is primarily focusing on the peeled log standard because the concerns that were expressed were that there's a longevity issue with them, or potentially that. And so that will be, it's basically what material is best to use for posts in the wayfinding signage family, which are currently now peeled log. Yeah.
So if I could ask then, do we know when that might be coming back to committee for discussion? And I guess it would require, if there are changes that council wants to see, it would require a direction to further amend the signage standards manual.
Thank you to the chair and through to the rest of council. That's correct. It would take another amendment to the signage standards manual. And I don't have a date for that because the issue there, I think it's not really fair to bring forward alternatives to the peeled log without some costing and feasibility questions answered. And we just haven't been able to address that so far. But I think that probably within the next 6 months, we could have that pulled together for you and get some idea of that to present as well as the alternatives.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, is there anything further? Okay, seeing nothing further from council. There is a motion before us that council approves the amendments to the 2011 Town of Hinton Signage Standards Manual as presented. If there are no further comments or questions, please vote now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Is there anything further on item 6.5? Nothing. We'll move on to 6.6, Green Square Sign Capital Project. Administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will refer this one to Ms. Juke as well.
Thank you. And through the chair to the rest of council. This item is to request approval of a capital project to replace the interpretive sign in Green Square with a budget of $15,000. This project was initially proposed in the 2023 budget deliberations, but funding at that time was not available. Since then, the town was successful in achieving a $5,000 grant support from the Northern and Regional Economic Development Program for the project, proposing a budget of $15,000 for it in that grant application. One of the difficulties in approving this project has been settling on a sign standard for such a central interpretive display in Green Square. And on August 22nd, Committee of the Whole reviewed some options, none of which were based on the Town of Hinton Sign Standards Manual. Just to remind everyone, the original sign installed before there were installed before there were sign standards, and that's pictured on page 69 of the agenda today, just to remind everybody. However, since the manual is in place and just updated, thank you for that, we can look to it for an option which will be cohesive with other sign standards in town. Administration is proposing basing the replacement sign on the illustrated example on page 70 of the agenda, and that's for a multi-panel interpretive sign for major interpretive displays. Council should expect that the final installation will have some variation in the beam lengths from this standard, just so administration can leverage the existing foundation and post brackets from the removed sign. This will be a winter project, so we want to make sure we can use that foundation that's in place. And it'll also reduce costs. As for some enhancements, administration is proposing adding metal silhouette panels as best fits the final design to the finished product, requesting proponents consider lighting either under the roof or between the panels for evening effects, and refreshing, of course, the historical interpretation with up-to-date information. And with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Ju. Council, are there any comments, questions, or discussion? Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that council approves the Green Square Sign Capital Project with a budget of $15,000 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Did you want to speak to it? No. Okay, thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, I don't quite understand. The capital cost is 15,000 and we've got a $5,000 grant. So why is the unbudgeted cost 15,000? Wouldn't it be 10?
Administration.
Thank you. And through the chair to the rest of council, because we have to this is not an approved capital project today. So we have to get a budget of $15,000, and the unbudgeted costs there is no budget for this project at all at this time. So the unbudgeted costs are $15,000. We do have some funding for that, but currently there's no budget in place for this project at all.
So we only need $10,000 extra to do the work.
We need $10,000 extra to do the work. That's the difference between the grant funding and the project budget. But we need council's authorization to spend $15,000 in order to do the project as budgeted.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Good, Councillor Taylor.
I had one more question, and that's because I wasn't here on August 22nd.
There's no one else in queue. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so I look at this picture here, page 66. And then I look at some of the pictures in the sign manual that we just approved. And some of these big signs have sleeves, and some of these signs just have, little slot things. I would have thought they would have all had sleeves to protect the base from rotting. Is that a concern at all?
Administration.
You know what I'm saying?
Thank you through the chair and to the rest of council. I do know what you're saying. Not all of the sign standards have sleeves.
Yes.
Some have posts. We'll have to check that, but again, to reduce costs, I'll want to reuse the brackets that we do have. And again, winter project, it's going to be rather difficult to pour new concrete and use different standards for the post brackets. So if you look at page 70 of the agenda, you'll see the standard that we're proposing to use.
Yeah, it's just that when I look at these pictures and I look at some of the signs that don't have those sleeves, I see what looks like, a degree of rotting at the base. So I would have thought that having the metal sleeve would have been more protective. I just didn't notice that in the sign standard till now. But that's all. But if it's not an issue, that's fine.
So if I may, through the chair to the rest of council, I think it's a good comment. And I think what we'll do is we'll have a look to make sure that the brackets that are embedded in the concrete foundation at the green square have some spacer underneath them so that the post isn't resting on the ground, which isn't on the bottom of the bracket. And if the bottom of the bracket is also flush with the ground, and I can't recall offhand if that's the case, but it would be prudent to put some kind of spacer in there just to lift that post up a little bit out of the water. Yeah, we'll have a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I guess got some clarity now, but I'm a little concerned. With the previous question that we have, bringing the materials that we're going to be using in the future and moving forward with this project, it sounds like we're going with logs. And my concern is we're not going with logs. Sorry, we're talking about sleeves. We're talking about rotting. I'm confused. Are we going with logs with this sign or are we not going with logs?
To administration.
Thank you. And through the chair to the rest of council. Sorry for the confusion. No, if you look at page 70 of your agenda, you'll see the standard for a multi-panel interpretive sign, which is post and beam. So that's cut rough sawn lumber, post and beam.
Okay, so it's going to be different, but it's still going to be wood. It's not going to be any type of other material.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
And in fact, the color will be the same as well with the it'll be the same as the color for the peeled logs primarily.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. My understanding.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, is there anything further? Seeing nothing further from council, I will comment on before we call to question. I had concerns too, that I see that this new sign standards is still wood. It's not peeled logs, but it is still wood, which has the potential to weather and rot. I am looking forward to having a discussion about what's going to happen in the future regarding building materials. For this one, though, I am comfortable in moving forward with it, and I will support the motion because it is partly protected by a roof structure over it. It is also above grade. It does look like in the pictures that even these steel brackets are above grade. So it should have a fairly long working life. So as I said, I will support it. But I am looking forward to that additional discussion about signage materials that we're going to have in the future. Council, is there anything further before we call the motion to question? Seeing nothing further from council, there is the motion that council approves the Green Square Sign Capital Project with a budget of $15,000 as presented. Please vote now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Is there anything further regarding action item 6.6 before we move on? Seeing nothing further, we'll move on to 6.7, FCSS level of service policy CS 7202 to administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will refer this to Ms. Juke as well.
Thank you. And through the chair to the rest of council, I'll present this item and then Manager Bouchard is here to answer any questions that you may have about the FCSS service level. So this item is to recommend approval of the attached proposed FCSS level of service policy, CS 7202. Council had a first review of this policy at the August 8th, 2023 Committee of the Whole and referred it to a regular meeting of council. That's why you're seeing it today. Before I brief council and the viewing public on the policy itself, just some background about levels of service policy. Levels of service policies for town functional areas are a 2023 tactical plan item supporting council's 2022 to 2025 strategic goal to complete a systematic review of the service levels for the 2023 budget cycle. Direction has been to capture the current level of service provided in each functional area. So the draft policy before you today has been written to meet that challenge. So to list some of the highlights of the policy, the opening statements capture the legislative framework within which FCSS services, including childcare, are funded and regulated by the provincial government, as well as the town of Hinton. Parameters that administration uses to develop, deliver, monitor, and measure activities to meet local service needs are outlined in detail. Existing programs, services, projects, and interagency partnerships are also listed in the policy, as well as graphically laid out in Schedule A. And the service branches activities in the event of emergencies is also captured. So with that outline, FCSS Manager Bouchard and I will address any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Juke. Council, are there any comments or questions? Discussion, motion? Councillor LaBerge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is, it looks 2023 that Hinton taxpayers contributing 510,000. Is that correct? This current year?
Administration.
Thank you. Good question. Mayor through to council. Yes, that is correct.
And so if I could just, so as my follow-up then, so really by and given the way that costs have gone, by approving this today, really, we're saying it's going to be 510 plus whatever it costs because costs have been advancing. So this sort of sets the base for budget next year. Is that correct?
Administration.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Now, Councillor LaBerge. Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, I'm confused. That sounded like a different answer than when I asked that question. So we got total expenses of $1,088,000. We've got some sort of cost recovery here someplace of after we get the cost recovery, how much do we have left? Cost recovery of this functional area is 53%. So that's that's over $510,000. So we got 510,000 left over. And of that, we get back 444 from the province, which only seems to leave 80 to 90,000 for the town to pay. So I don't understand the answer.
Administration.
So I'll weigh in on this one. There was some confusion about the budget numbers and the costs to the town of Hinton ratepayers last committee meeting. And I did review the committee meeting twice to make sure that I understood the different topics that were being discussed and the conclusions that we were brought to. And there was some misunderstanding in the discussion, that the information that administration provided. So to be clear, the program costs just over $1 million. The cost recovery on that is 53%. That's grant funding, including the province of Alberta's grant funding to the town of Hinton. That has gone up actually by $70,000. We received that this year. So in fact, next year's costs for FCSS there'll be $70,000 more in provincial grant funding, which is a good news note. But there is some confusion. And so it is the case that the town of Hinton ratepayers pay $510,632 for the total suite of programs that FCSS delivers. And the cost, the 53% cost recovery includes the amount that the province pays for FCSS, all the other grants that the FCSS group achieves. Yeah, that's the grant funding, and fees that users pay. I hope that's.
Well, it's just that completely changes everything for me, because that's a completely different answer than I was given the last time I was there. This raises a high level of concern over this program. We've taken a provincially funded program and we've doubled the size over our mandate. I thought it was just going to be like a small increase. To me, we have to look at this and really seriously look at some of these programs, especially the ones that are already getting done by somebody else, to see if we can do things like the Canada pension plan, the Service Canada stuff, and see if we want to continue doing some of that to get some of those costs back. We can't keep taking on provincial responsibilities and then try to keep the taxes reasonable and do core services. This changes everything for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council? Councillor Race?
Have a Service Canada in Hinton, or if I wanted to talk to somebody about my CPP or old age, do I have to drive to Epsom?
Administration?
Thank you, Council. To talk about old age CPP, we can do that at FCSS Alberta Supports. Where you would need to go to Edson would be for a what's the application? Passport application, everything like that. But for old age CPP, no, they don't just have to travel to Edson.
I'm sorry.
They don't have to travel to Edson.
Oh, okay.
It can be in Hinton. Yeah.
I do have another question, sir.
Is it a follow-up or a different question?
Different question.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Magoon, and if you want to put yourself back in queue. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a very expensive program to the town of Hinton. That being said, and that doesn't mean that it's not without merit or not without importance, but if we're talking about a level of service, and I apologize, I wasn't at the meeting of the 16th, so I do want to start with that. But if you refer to the last page of the level of service policy that was provided, CS 7202, the area of concern for myself, and just speaking for myself, is the 49 blue programs that we deliver as a community. And I think certainly to a degree, I share some of the concerns that Councillor Taylor has expressed. I think it would be responsible of us to continue to do some of the hard work in examining what programs we offer as a community, where is there potentially a duplication of service, and how much are these programs costing the town on a program by program basis. I realize there's some work there, but I think there might be some efficiencies to be found. And ultimately, there's some diligence that we as council can and should do. Again, if we come away from that and we feel like all 49 of those programs should continue as is, based on how much they're currently costing, I'm okay with that. But I think some further discussion would not hurt in terms of to ensure that we are using taxpayers' dollars wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor.
Well, this kind of changes the motion I would have put forward if I was at the meeting back there, if I'd had this information that was now available. Because the motion I would have put forward would be ask, because of the cost of this program to the taxpayer and the mandate to the program, I would have put forward a motion to ask administration to do some of the heavy lifting and to prioritize this into different priorities as to what could, high, medium, and low. So we could look at some of the lower priority programs and see if we can still justify the costs of those programs. And at the end of the day, we might be able to justify the cost of some of those programs, but there could be a few of those programs that we could say, no, we'd like to, there's already a way to get this done and we'd like to do that. So that would have been the motion that I would have put forward if I'd had this kind of information available back then.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, anything further? Councillor LaBerge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to direct administration to bring this item to a future committee of the whole meeting so that we can have another discussion about it. Like Councillor Taylor, it was initially, I understood that the 444 from the provincial government was coming off the 510. It was $88,000, which made a lot of sense for what was delivered. But when you take a look at the list of services done, those are all provincial services, and more, they're just pushing all that stuff back on municipalities, and it's a difficult situation. So I think this at that level of spending and pre any discussion on budget, locking this amount of money down to me just I think warrants some additional discussion. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Councillor LaBerge. Just before we move on, though, I just want to clarify that's option 3, but you're specifying to a committee of the whole.
Future meeting and council is fine.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor LaBerge. Council, we do have a motion before us now. Anyone like to speak to it? Councillor Magoon.
I just want to sort of gauge the feelings of our fellow councillors before I throw a motion out there. I would support that. I think moving forward with the re-examination of this at a future committee of the whole is probably the best for all of us, just to make sure that we're supportive and we feel like we've been diligent in examining the level of service.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, anything further? Councillor Haas.
Just a quick question to administration. I'm not against this. I'm just wondering, this seems to be quite an in-depth endeavor with that many programs and trying to understand the purpose of the programs, purpose of what the budget is, things like that, so we can make a decision. I'm just wondering if this might be more of, say, under the category of a workshop rather than a council meeting, just for how much might be involved in this. And it's just looking to administration for the recommendation, because we tend to have a lot of other businesses going on. Is that going to chew up a lot of time? Should it be something a little different? So I'll look at it. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. To administration, did you want to speak to
that? Yeah, through the chair, I can take that one. My preference would be, it could certainly be a workshop or some other format or a committee of the whole. I just think that from where we are now, staff has done what I have directed them to do, which was codify what we currently do so we can facilitate this type of conversation. So I think we're there. But I think, a committee of the whole where we start to discuss what our next steps are, I think might be more appropriate. So if that is the will of council, that would be at least my preference.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Haas and CEO Panasic. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I would think it would be up to council to give some sort of direction, like, maybe I can only see 2 options now, but option 1 is we go through these programs and say this is duplicate. we want it or we don't want it, which would be foolish of us. Or we go to administration because they're the experts and we say prioritize the programs and, absolutely important, number 2 and number 3. And then we look at the number 3s based on some sort of priority. And that would be the kind of direction that we might be looking at, give them when we talk about it in committee. But we would be giving that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
I guess I just have a question to Councillor Taylor's last comment. If he would sort of envision this as ask administration to sort of prioritize what we as a community are doing right now, and then have council sort of work on that recommendation. My only concern is I don't want to put administration in the position of saying, okay, well, there's tough decisions to make. You make the tough decisions, and then we sort of come after the fact. I would be worried that might not be fair if you could just comment on that so I can see what this looks like playing out.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, it could go either way. I don't want to predetermine a discussion we're going to have at a future meeting, but my only thought would be that they don't necessarily make the final decisions, but they're the experts in this subject. So they might be able to help us prioritize a certain level over and above what we can do with our limited knowledge. We would then make whatever the final decisions if we decided to go that way.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Just then as a clarification, would the guiding criteria to administration be, programs that are offered in some level by the provincial government or should be offered in some level by the provincial government or have been offered? I'm just wondering what's the criteria administration would use in order to prioritize this prior to that meeting? That's my question, I think.
Could be a program where the service is already provided and we're doing a duplicate service or something. I don't know, but that's what we'll talk about, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Are you good for now, Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I guess my personal feeling is I feel like we're getting into a bit of the programming weeds here as a council. Our objective is budget, and I get that. I guess what is our administration's recommendation? Because I feel like, we're digging into 49 programs and going to be making decisions on programming, which is not our role as a council, in my opinion. It's valid that we're having questions about the budget, but when it comes to what services are out there, and cutting or whatever service, that's not our job. And so I'm curious as to administration, how do you see this rolling out from your point of view? Because I don't want to go down and make those decisions, honestly. To me, if it's a budget thing, then we look at budget and then say, here's your budget, and then what are you going to offer? And that's an administrative duty. So can you comment on that? Because that's where I'm struggling with this.
You, Councillor Haas, to administration.
Thank you through the chair to the rest of council. So there are two ways that you can do it. You set the budget and, administration builds the programming from there. But that isn't necessarily my preference. I think that we start with the services, and for us as administration, we are facilitators for good decision making. And what is important or what is not, or what is less important to a municipality would be the decision of the elected officials. And so that's what we as administration would facilitate that discussion. Certainly FCSS is a difficult a program just because we do have a lot of different services that are provided and they are more fluid. But that doesn't mean that, we can certainly brainstorm and come prepared to council with how we can facilitate a good discussion and what criteria we could be looking at. But ultimately, the programming that we deliver as administration comes from the direction of council.
Good, Councillor Haas.
Yes.
Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment and I have a question. And my big comment here is I am so fearful that FCSS will leave this meeting today thinking we're coming after them, and we're not. I applaud the work that they do. We have such a good FCSS in our community. But we just gotta know exactly what happens there, so we can work together well. Here's my question. Do you see yourself ever duplicating or supporting an existing something that's happening in town, like homelessness? You're not duplicating it. So where do you stand with homelessness, with helping people with mental illness, with drugs?
Administration?
Thank you, Councillor Race. So in regards to the duplication of services, it's actually under the Family and Community Support Services Regulation that FCSSs cannot duplicate services in the community. So whether it's we pick up the initiative and then hand it off to a nonprofit that has the capacity, or FCSS takes back the initiative or the project because a nonprofit or a group doesn't have the capacity anymore. So that's a lot of the work that FCSS does. And sorry, what was your second part? Oh, homelessness. So I added that to my portfolio and the family life portfolio. And then we dropped a program like community dinners. Like I was saying at the community of the whole in August there, we review our programs annually. And so every program that we create, it's called the Project Logic Model. And that Project Logic Model, we have to identify the needs, gaps in the community. And then every year we take that Project Logic Model, it's called an outcome summary. And all of the feedback, the surveys, word of mouth, we compile all that data to ensure that that program is justified to deliver it again the year after. And so that's how we ensure that the gaps and the needs are covered in the community year after year. So then, for example, the Respite Care Action Group, there's a gap in the community. So we picked that up and then we dropped a couple programs that weren't as a big of a priority in the community. Same with supporting Hinton Abilities Network. We picked that up because there's that need for programming for individuals with disabilities in the community. Homelessness, Hinton Employment Learning Place, we partnered with them and a variety of other partners and citizens. And so I've put that under my portfolio and a portion of the family life portfolio, and then they drop a program too. And we do that annually every year to shift and to pick up the gaps in the community.
I know we see or hear from you guys. To me, it seems like a lot, and I'm really looking forward to having another conversation and hearing what you guys do. So thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think going back to previous comments, I think duplication of service maybe isn't the right phrasing. I think, and somebody else had mentioned it earlier, I think the downloading of service is really the major concern for the province as an example. And it's not to be an attack, but it's one thing for the province to say we have a responsibility as the province to provide a service. It's something else for the province to say, well, we used to handle this service, but now we're going to go in halfsies with you, as a community to provide said service. Okay, well, what you just said is you want us to pay half. And that's one thing for us service. But over the years, we've all seen it, the portfolio of supports that the town is responsible for coordinating, it's growing. And it doesn't mean that they're not important, but it does mean that somebody's got to pay the bill. And you can only download those services in part even to the community for so long. So I think to continue to allow that to happen without having a real constructive conversation, without it, and again, I would like to reemphasize what Councillor Ray says, that is not an attack on what the town does in any way, shape, or form. It's really to take a very realistic look at this portfolio that has grown over the years and to say, why has it grown? What are we doing? What are we able to continue doing in the future? What's sustainable for us as a community? I think that's a really important conversation to continue to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, to quickly add to that too, I mean, we are seeing a pattern of the downloading. And I think having a better understanding of that, especially going into, we've talked about having a retreat and talking to ministers. I think this is an important conversation to have as well, because we're seeing it more and more. I just saw the other day, actually, a municipality looking at offsetting electrical costs because the costs are going so up, and subsidizing and a municipality, that's, why is a municipality considering even that, and we're just seeing more and more of that. And I think if that's the direction of this discussion, that is important, because it's not only important for our community, others to speak up, also for our staff as well. So I like that, because I look at this list and I agree. I don't think duplicating is, because I'm very familiar with all the services, or most of the service in our community. I don't see one duplication whatsoever of another organization here. But I think, having an understanding, as Councillor Magoon said, is, what have we extra do we have, and what's downloaded to understand that, so we can advocate for it. So I like how this conversation is going now, because this isn't an attack on the services at all, in my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor, are there any other additional comments, questions, or debate? Councillor Magoon?
We'll give it a shot and we'll see if it takes there, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that council, sorry, I better look at the right one. That council directs administration.
Sorry, Councillor.
Oh,
I believe we already.
I am sorry. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Yeah. Council, it's been a while since the motion was made, so that's understandable. This is the motion that's before us. So are there any other comments or questions regarding the motion before it gets called to question? Okay, seeing nothing further from council, then if we could see the motion, please. There's a motion that council directs administration to return the proposed FCSS level of service policy CS 7202 to a future meeting of council. Council, if you could please vote now. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Now, council, is there anything further? Councillor Taylor?
For the young people in the crowd, could we have a biological break, please?
Sure. Yeah, we can call a recess for, we'll call a 6-minute recess and reconvene at 5:35. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to call tonight's regular meeting of council back to order at 5:36 p.m. Is there anything further regarding 6.7 FCSS level of service policy before we move on? Seeing nothing from council or administration. 6.8 electrical vehicle EV maintenance van purchase to administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will turn this one over to Mr. McLaughlin.
Good evening, council. So I'm here to present the electric vehicle maintenance van purchase. We originally had a van in the 2022 capital budget, and when we did the 2023 capital budget, it was postponed till 2024 so that we could look at getting a study done on electric vehicles, as well as chase some grant opportunities. So we did both of those tasks. We ATCO completed a EV study, and we chased a grant, and we were successful in that, and we got a $14,000 grant. We wanted to be able to make sure that we could actually purchase the vehicle within the grant requirements, which means you actually have to have everything purchased by March 31st, 2024. So we ordered a vehicle, planning on buying the vehicle with 2024 budget in January. And then the vehicle went and came in way quicker than we ever anticipated. So we've put this report together that outlines the costs. There's still $45,000 in the reserve from when it was budgeted back in 2022. However, the cost still exceeds that. The cost to the town will be $54,830. And with that, I'm assuming that you've read it, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. McLaughlin. Council, I have Councillor Taylor.
Hey, when this report says that the van we're proposing to buy is economical when the government grants are considered, is the cost of the charging stations factored into that? Because I couldn't quite understand that. It says it indicated that they weren't factored in.
Administration.
Yes, through the chair to the rest of the council. So when we first got a first draft of the report and we asked some questions, they actually were finding that the vans wouldn't make financial sense when you looked at the amount of gas they will offset versus the cost of them. However, they weren't aware that we got the $14,000 grant. And so when they found out we had the 14,000 grant, that brought down the purchase costs to the point where it met the threshold for being recommended. So if there was no grant, this purchase wouldn't make full economic sense in terms of the current gas prices and the study that ATCO was doing. But in terms of your question for EV chargers, the amount of EV charging that we will need for this will be relatively small, probably in the neighborhood of $800 for a level 2 charger. We won't need fast charging for how this vehicle's used. As long as you can plug into a level 2 charger and charge overnight, you'll be back up to 100%. My guess is that during a course of a day, they won't even burn anywhere near 15-20% of the battery power in this van. So, as long as you're not commuting far out of town, which this van will hardly ever do, you won't have need for a powerful charger, and the charging cost should be relatively small.
Oh, could I ask a follow-up?
Mhm.
Okay, still confused. The report says the cost of the charging station is either 15,000 or 29,500. Is that true?
Administration.
When it comes to chargers, how fast you can charge is dependent on what you buy for a charger, and they come in a whole range of sizes. If we get up to the point of having a few vehicles, we will want to buy the more expensive charger and be able to recharge a vehicle quickly, let's say in like 2 to 3 hours. What I'm throwing out there for a charger cost of $800 would be to recharge in 12 to 14 hours. So when they talked about their cost there, that's what it would cost for a charger that would recharge quickly. I'm suggesting we do not need to purchase that for one van. I run an electric vehicle myself. I use the charger that comes with the car. It works just fine.
Okay, so the charger will be less than $1,000 probably.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've already set aside $45,000 in reserves. So the extra amount that we're asking is just shy of $10,000 to cover that cost. Just out of curiosity, that $10,000, what reserve is that going to come from?
Administration.
I'll refer that to Ms. Barbeau.
Through to council, that will come from the equipment reserve. And that is sitting at approximately $1 million right now.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, just to follow up, so the $10,000 rebate, it says it includes that rebate, but it's the dealership's responsibility to collect that rebate. Does that rebate, does that come back to us or does it go to the dealership?
Administration.
Through the chair to the rest of the council. So if you go to the purchase information that's included as an attachment, you'll see the actual purchase price of the vehicle.
Mhm.
The $68,000 is after the $10,000 that the Ford will get back themselves. So the cost to the town will be 54,000 after both the 10,000 and the $14,000 grant.
And just one more follow-up. If I recall from, we're also under a bit of a time crunch for that to happen. If I recall from the community, the whole meeting briefly, we have to have this decided upon whether we go through with it to meet the time frame to possibly get that rebate back. Is that correct?
Administration.
Through the chair to the rest of the council. So yes, we ordered the van. The van has now come in. If we choose not to proceed with this purchase and put it forward to budget deliberations, then what would happen is we'd run the risk that they sell that van to somebody else. And then we potentially might not be able to find another one to purchase before the end of March 31st. So we have to have the purchase done by March 31st to get the $14,000 grant.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I don't remember seeing what the cost of a gas powered van in this report was. Was it in there? What page is that on? I don't know how you can do a feasibility study and not have the cost of the alternative in it. What page is that on?
Administration.
Through the council, I would have to look through and read because it was ATCO that put that feasibility study together, and I would have to go through it to find where that is. I wouldn't know it off the top of my head, but
Well, just maybe tell us what the cost is then.
I wouldn't know off the top of my head. I would be guessing.
Because I looked through this 3 times and I couldn't find it. I don't know how you do a feasibility study with one thing versus the other if you don't put the cost of the other thing in there. Maybe I just missed it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Did you have a follow-up?
No.
Councillor Magoon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess along a similar thread in the report on the first page, second paragraph under background, it's an electric van was approved in the 2022 capital budget for a value of $45,000. So I guess my follow-up question is if it was the will of council, and I certainly don't know if it is, but if it was the will of council to try and seek out a lower price point on a conventional vehicle, would those funds have to be reallocated, or because it says, an electric van was approved in the 22 capital budget for 45,000, would that 45,000 have to be reallocated, or would we have to revisit a decision of council? I guess that's my question. Thanks.
Administration.
Through the chair to the rest of the council, I think if you decided today not to proceed with this purchase, then the purchase of the van would become part of your budget discussions, whether it be electric or gas. We would put together a new capital request as part of the 2024 budget for you to decide.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I guess to the question posed, I mean, there is on page 13 of 33 an attachment under the fleet feasibility study. There's a baseline vehicle data that does speak to what gasoline and the costs and the kilometers and such. That's portrayed in that one. I guess the other thing, I mean, feasibility wise, I don't necessarily see any grants being sent out for any gas or diesels or anything else. This is a trend, and this is something that we're looking at. And I believe throughout the feasibility study, there was quite a few different analogy between gas and the comparison, and that it is much, I found from what I gathered from this, a lot less costs to the electric as it was to to the gas, from what I read in the feasibility study. So, I just thought I'd point that out, and that particular page might be helpful. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Taylor?
What, the range of this van seems so bad. Like, it's 200 kilometers. And in the report, they say it goes down by 50% in cold weather, so it's 100 kilometers. So what that doesn't seem very far to me. What are we using this van for? Is this to pack people in and drive them around, or is this like a work van with a bunch of equipment in it?
Administration?
Through the chair to the rest of the council, this van is a maintenance van used by our building maintenance crew. They put their tools in it and they travel just to the various town buildings for conducting maintenance.
Okay.
Which, you're right. That is not a very far range, but they don't need a far range for this given purpose.
Thank you. Councillor Magoon?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If it's the will of council to explore this purchase as a means of evaluating, to what extent are future electric vehicles feasible for the fleet, I would actually be supportive of that purchase, given the fact that we have already budgeted 45,000. That being said, regarding the feasibility study, I have some major concerns as well. One of the major concerns, the feasibility study on page 6, it talks about the lifespan of the batteries that are installed in the vehicles. The one thing that it doesn't specifically dive into, unless I missed it, was the replacement cost of those batteries over a given period of time. The other thing that's concerning for me too is, if we do a feasibility study and one of our selected vehicles is if it's stored inside while it's recharging overnight consistently, I don't think that's a fair measurement for those vehicles in the fleet that would be parked outside, over the full length of the year, year after year after year, because it's not as it's not as hard on the batteries being stored inside a garage while being charged as opposed to being stored outside. Again, just sharing my thoughts with council. I'm willing to explore this, but I do certainly think that there's some areas of concern if we're going to look at potentially expanding more vehicles in the fleet that are fully electric. So just some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to move that council direct administration to proceed with the purchase of the EV transit van Griffiths Ford and accept the ATCO feasibility study for information. And if I could speak to it. I have my reservations as well. I have my concerns as well when it comes to electrical. But I think this is, as Councillor Magoon says, an opportunity for us. We've already put aside for this purchase. We're getting grants for it, rebates. It gives us an opportunity to take a look at, adding electric and then look at over time to see that feasibility study for ourselves as a community. Because I do too have that reservations about winter months and the costs that might be associated to the batteries and other things too that may crop up as well. But this is an opportunity to explore it. It doesn't get driven a great deal of distance. I too have that reservation, as Councillor Taylor mentioned. So when we're looking at vehicles that might be traveling, maybe that isn't more feasible than electric, but this is an opportunity to look at it. So that's where I'm at with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Taylor?
Sorry, was there a motion that was getting put up?
Yep.
Is it up there? Okay.
It's the recommended action.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm a little reluctant to support the recommended action. I just don't, I have too much respect for taxpayers' money to be experimental. And I just not that convinced that the technology is here for electric cars in a northern climate. I think that when we get into some of these submarginal technologies, and I do use the term submarginal technologies because this thing has to be subsidized in order to be economical. Often they come with unforeseen or unanticipated points that we just can't see. We've seen one or two of them, like the range. And not saying that electric technology's time might come, but if maybe I think it's best that we wait 5 to 10 years. I also kind of think that with some of these government grants, particularly these government grants when they relate to energy projects, that the project has to stand on its own before the government grant is considered. I mean, I don't apply that logic to like rec centers or water treatment because that's core business. But I think, and that's because there is only one taxpayer that pays this. But it's primarily because of my uncertainty over this technology and what's going to happen that I'm a little reluctant. I'd rather sit back, be careful with taxpayers' money, watch other communities in the northern environment get this and see where they go from here. I mean, we haven't even nobody has even been able to explain to me the cost of the gas powered alternative, which I thought would have been fundamental to a feasibility study. So I just don't have the information to support this. Thank you.
You, Councillor Taylor, Councillor LaBerge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've been listening carefully and I'm actually going to speak in favor of this. Looking at the cost of 50 and other grants aside, other levels of government aside, at the end of the day, speaking purely from the perspective of the taxpayers in town of Hinton. And I had the same thing written down beside the 54,830. I said, well, what does a gas unit cost? But I got to guess that a gas unit's going to cost almost that much money. And I know that there are cost savings, there's maintenance savings. And so I think at the end of the day, if you can buy it for roughly the same price as you would pay for a gas vehicle, ultimately you're going to end up saving money. I don't know exactly what that comparative number is, but given that it's close to what I believe we would pay for a van anyhow, I would support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge, Councillor Haas.
Sorry. Thank you. Just a quick question. If this doesn't pass, is there any costs associated? We're not locked into this with Griffiths Ford or any way. There's no deposit. There's nothing, any losses.
Through the council or through the chair to the rest of council, there's $1,000 deposit, but it is refundable. So no, there wouldn't be any lost money if you choose not to purchase it.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas, Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To administration, I too think vehicles cost an arm and a leg. They're a lot of money, whether it's electrical or gas. All vehicles come with warranty, and I'm sure warranty is part of this package, but could you speak to the warranty on this vehicle?
Administration.
Yes, through the chair to the rest of the council. Specifically on the batteries, the warranty is 8 years, 160,000 kilometers. So that's on just the batteries. The rest of the vehicle, I believe, is your standard 36 months, 60,000.
Thank you. CEO Panasic, did you want to add?
Through the chair, it was a separate point of clarification.
Related to this or?
It was related to a previous concern of not making the comparison in relation to gas vehicles. I just wanted to point out that the way I read the report is when they look at the comparisons, they're looking at payback periods, and those paybacks are compared to the conventional combustion engines. But the payback period of what I read through the report is that it's a payback on it's a higher cost up front for electric vehicles, but they're a lower cost of ownership over a long period of time. So throughout the report, they look at payback periods on all the different types of electric vehicles, being vans, trucks, cars, and they do that analysis. Now, they don't specifically spell out or they specify the costs related to the traditional vehicles, but I'm sure that's certainly something we could get from ATCO. The other side is if there is a need for more information, there are a number of case studies that have gone electric well before this. We could certainly canvass, provide additional information from, primarily with urban municipalities. This works well, like ours, with contained boundaries that don't have to compete with range issues like a rural municipality, but there are quite a few municipalities who have gone to electric, whether that be transit or maintenance vehicles or any number of different alternatives, but the case studies are out there. We can certainly provide that.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. I have Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Race, did you have a
I
follow-up?
just have one follow-up.
Sorry, Councillor. McGee.
So I want to thank you very much for that little talk on warranty. One more question. With electric bikes, there's a concern about charging electric bikes in enclosed areas, that fire hazard that we're hearing about. Is that concern, relative to an electric car also?
Administration.
Through the chair to the rest of the council, not that I'm aware of. I've charged a electric vehicle inside in a garage for close to a year, and no one has ever told me not to do that. So not that I'm aware of.
I know that concern is out there with bikes, eh? So my bike will never be charged in the garage. So with cars, it's not a big issue then. But that's what I'm hearing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank Councillor Race for the warranty question and Mr. McLaughlin for your response. That actually helps push me in the direction of supporting the motion on the floor. If I know that we've got a warranty that, 8 years is starting to push the service life of any fleet vehicle. I think with the town, they've seen a lot of wear and tear at that point. I'm willing to support it at that point, knowing that those batteries have been a major cost for electric vehicles so far. That being said, the feasibility study for me, it's one thing. What is actually more valuable for me is the report from administration on the tail end of having this thing. Once administration has had this in the fleet for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and I'll be frank, I hope you beat the heck out of the vehicle and really push it, because what I'd like the town to know is what's its capabilities down the road, right? Is this something that we have to treat gingerly and make sure it's inside in order to get the maximum usage? Because that's the stuff that's going to inform those decisions down the road about, are we really ready to electrify a large portion of the fleet? And so I hope when we're looking at the tail end of this, that and I'm sure you will, bring a frank conversation to us to say, hey, look, this has been our experience with it. The range has been awful, or the range has been good, or we really have to baby this thing. So I'd like to know that when we're looking at these decisions down the road. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, another point would be that I just want to make before I finish. Instead of buying subsidized electrical vehicles in a cold country, I think we go with established technology and buy gas powered. We're supporting our oil and gas industry in this region, and we live in a northern climate, and we're going to need that energy from that industry to survive in the foreseeable future. So I like to think we're supporting them with that purchase if we went with gas powered. Thank you.
You, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, and I agree with that incentive, but at the same time, I think we have to also look at balancing it. And if we can offset some costs in the long run on certain vehicles that don't go far, whereas we do know in a northern country, or northern area, we may not be able to it may not be feasible to have electric vehicles for long distances, but if we can offset some costs in the long run, as CEO Panasic said, it's not necessarily the upfront cost, but it's the back end cost that we're saving. So again, I hope that the rest of the council sees and is in favor of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas, Councillor LaBerge.
And maybe we go back to administration and go to staff and tell them not to kick crap out of that.
Noted.
Thank you for that, Councillor LaBerge. With no further questions or comments from council. If we could see the motion, please. Oh, my apologies, Councillor Taylor.
This vehicle historically gets 6,000 kilometers a year, right? So in 7 years, it'll only be 42,000 kilometers or 45,000 kilometers. So the warranty is hardly going to be an issue at all with the current usage. Correct? Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, anything further? Okay, seeing nothing further from council. There is the motion that council direct administration to proceed with the purchase of the EV transit van Griffiths Ford and accept the ATCO feasibility study for information. If there's no further comments or questions, please vote now. And that is passed 5-1 with Councillor Taylor voting against. Council, is there anything further on 6.8 electrical vehicle maintenance van purchase before we move on? Seeing nothing further, we will go on to 6.9, adopt bylaw 1169-1 Hinton Youth Advisory Council Administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will turn it over to Ms. Juke.
Thank you. And through the chair to the rest of council. On August 22nd, 2023, administration presented a draft amended Appendix 1 terms of reference for the current bylaw 1169 Hinton Youth Advisory Council. Administration had identified the need for clarified expectations within the TOR, specifically concerning volunteer hours and participation in the annual project or council meetings alternatively, to ensure successful youth counselor engagement. Committee did not at that time indicate any significant changes to the draft that were advisable. The Hinton Youth Advisory Committee engages a specific sector of the public, Hinton's youth, to advise council as assigned and to introduce high school students to the wonderful world of committee work, volunteerism, and local government. Another benefit to participating for youth is that they can earn a $500 bursary towards post-secondary education. Some amendments are needed to the bylaw, which emerged over the past 2 years when disparities between the degree that youth counselors were involved in the annual project became evident. Currently participating in the project isn't required for a bursary. So this amended bylaw would change that, but still allow youth counselors to attend regular meetings of council as an alternative to that. Another significant change is to ensure that youth counselors attend a minimum number of HIAC meetings over the course of the term. Administration is recommending that council adopt this amending bylaw tonight. However, not as presented. There is one change that became flagged in the last couple of days, and we'd like to propose a different section 8 for this bylaw, Appendix 1. I'm going to read it out for the members of the public that can't see what's on the screen there. Currently, Section 8 dictates an amount per year that council will budget for HIAC, which is fairly inappropriate. Strictly speaking, a bylaw should not do that, bind council. So administration is recommending tonight that council adopt the bylaw as amended with a new Section 8 rather than as presented. And I'll just read it out. Section 8 says budget. 8.1, council will determine the annual budget allocated to HIAC. HIAC budget will be used for meeting meals, team building with marked clothing and swag items, HIAC operating expenses, and the bursary fund. Section 8.3 is HIAC's 2 annual reports will include reporting to council on how those funds are used. And with that, I'll myself and FCSS Manager Bouchard can address any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Just before I go to council, then just a question to administration regarding that amendment to section 8. Then does administration require a council motion to make that amendment, or is that an administrative amendment that we'll just be voting on the document that we all understood contains that amendment now?
Through the chair, because what we put in front of council today actually had it in there, we would be looking at first reading as amended, and we would be looking at council to support that amendment today, just because it wasn't included prior. So if we could provide the first meeting as amended, that would incorporate the change that we had made here today to section 8. That would be satisfactory for us.
Okay, so just to clarify, then you don't need a motion from council directing administration to amend section 8 to match what was just shown to us?
Through the chair, if we would like to pass it as amended, then that as amended will include that change. If council would like to amend it as presented, it would be passed without the change to section 8.
Understood. Okay, so as long as everyone on council has a clear understanding of that, should be able to proceed then. Okay, over to council then. Any comments or questions or motions? Councillor Taylor?
I'd like to do the first recommended action that council gives first reading to bylaw 11691 Youth Advisory Council as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Did you want to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, are there any comments or questions? Seeing nothing from council then. Motion that council gives first reading to bylaw 1169-1 Hinton Youth Advisory Council as amended. Please vote now. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Haas.
Thank you. I'd like to move that council give second reading to bylaw 1169-1 Hinton Advisory Council as amended. And if I could quickly speak to it, I appreciate administration's due diligence on this. Clarity for our youth during is very important to understand their responsibilities and the accountability to as well, and to work as a group, as a team. So this is all these amendments, it really improves the document and gives administration and us that opportunity to encourage our youth to participate. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we do have a motion. Any comments or questions? Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will support this second motion. I just want to say for every mom out there, every mom and dad, every kid who has sat on this committee, I am so proud of you. To watch these kids make motions, to watch them put their hands up before they speak, to get permission to speak. It is, we're teaching these kids how to leave school and sit in a meeting and have a very productive meeting. So I'm just so proud of every one of them that I've seen in that committee. So I will certainly support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, anything further? Okay, seeing nothing further from council, we'd like to call to question the motion that council gives second reading to bylaw 1169-1 Hinton Youth Advisory Council as amended. Please vote no. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the council unanimously approves going to third reading of bylaw 1169-1 Hinton Youth Advisory Council as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Did you want to speak to that?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, any comments or questions? Councillor Haas.
Just to clarify, it is as amended, not as presented. That's all.
Councillor Magoon,
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you very much.
thank you for that clarification. If there's nothing further from council, we'll call to question the motion that council unanimously approves going to third reading of bylaw 1169-1 Hinton Youth Advisory Council as amended. Please vote now. And that is carried unanimously as well. Councillor Race.
Oh, I just gotta get to my spot. I would like to move the council give third reading and adopts bylaw 1169-1 Hinton Youth Advisory Council as amended. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Did you want to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Council, we do have a motion before us. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, seeing nothing from council, we'll call to question the motion that council gives third reading and adopts bylaw 1169-1 Hinton Youth Advisory Council as amended. Council, please vote now. And that is carried unanimously as well. So that passes the bylaw. Or is there anything further regarding 6.9 Hinton Youth Advisory Council bylaw before we move on? Councillor Haas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to mention the advisory council has one more meeting scheduled for September. And then it's recruitment time. So I just wanted to get the word out there that we are seeking recruitment for another term of the Hinton Youth Advisory Council. So those are going to be advertised within their schools and I believe the youth center and other places as well. So if anyone knows any parents or young or youth in their community that might be interested, let them know. And yeah, be exciting to see some older faces, hopefully, and also some new ones as well. And we haven't had a full recruitment in the last couple of years, so we'd really like to fill up those seats if we could. So thank you.
Thank you for that reminder and update, Councillor Haas. Council, anything further before we move on? Seeing nothing further from council, that brings us to item 7, correspondence and information items, and we do have a couple of proclamations this week. There is a bit of a change. The Rail Safety Week request was originally a request for a resolution, but it's not required to be a resolution. It's simply a proclamation from council. So we'll make that change. So this proclamation in support of Rail Safety Week. Whereas Rail Safety Week is to be held across Canada from September 18th to 24th, 2023. Whereas 232 railway crossing and trespassing incidents occurred in Canada in 2022, resulting in 66 avoidable fatalities and 43 avoidable serious injuries. Whereas educating and informing the public about rail safety, reminding the public that railway right-of-ways are private property, enhancing public awareness of the dangers associated with highway rail grade crossings, ensuring pedestrians and motorists are looking and listening while near railways, and obeying established traffic laws will reduce the number of avoidable fatalities and injuries caused by incidents involving trains and citizens. And whereas Operation Lifesaver is a public-private partnership whose aim is to work with the public rail industry, governments, police services, media, and others to raise rail safety awareness. Whereas CN has requested Town Council to adopt this proclamation in support of its ongoing efforts to raise awareness, save lives, and prevent injuries in communities, including our municipality. It is hereby proclaimed to support National Rail Safety Week to be held from September 18th to 24th, 2023. In addition, an additional proclamation regarding World Suicide Prevention Day, September 10th, 2023. Whereas September 10th is recognized as World Suicide Prevention Day, on this day, the town of Hinton wishes to raise the visibility of mental health and proactive suicide prevention resources in our community to destigmatize the issue and help connect people with the appropriate support services. And whereas suicide is the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 and 34, with more than 4,500 Canadians dying by suicide annually, an average of 12 per day, and with each death directly impacting 120 friends, colleagues, family, social media connections, and neighbors, we can assume everyone has been impacted by suicide. And whereas the stigma associated with suicide and its causes works against prevention by discouraging individuals from seeking life-saving help and also increasing the trauma survivors endure. And whereas suicide is preventable, if everyone becomes aware of warning signs and risk factors and knowing where to send individuals in distress for help, and whereas through resources available through the Town of Hinton's Family and Community Support Services, anyone can learn to recognize suicide risk and connect people to supports. Therefore, the Town of Hinton hereby proclaims September 10th, 2023 as World Suicide Prevention Day in Hinton, Alberta. I encourage citizens to attend the Hinton Rural Mental Health Action Team event on September 10th at 12 p.m. at the Path Building, 821 Switzer Drive, featuring keynote speaker Christopher Marks as he shares his personal story of surviving suicide, houselessness, and living with PTSD. That brings us to section 8, notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion that aren't on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, that brings us to council reporting. And I would start way over to my right with Councillor Taylor. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only have one thing to report. On Friday, I attended the Alberta Beautiful event that was held at the Green Square. It was a wonderful opportunity to see the unveiling of Judy Rusk's silhouettes that she's making. I was so proud of that lady. It was a good opportunity to listen to our dear Deputy Mayor make a really good speech and to eat some wonderful food from the old grind. So very, very well attended, and I'm so happy that I was able to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor LaBerge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I didn't do a lot of work, but I would like to say last year, Rotary's Oktoberfest is coming up on September 23rd. I think last year, 2 weeks before, we had 38 tickets sold. And I think the night of the event, we had 380 tickets sold. So Hinton, bless your heart, but God, go out and buy some tickets. Give people who organize these things a little bit of an opportunity to move forward with a little confidence. It's a great event. We got a fantastic band coming. The Audibles are going to be there. They play rock and roll, rhythm and blues, some country and western. They come really highly regarded. It'll be a great night out. As always, you get sausage and pretzels. So every dollar raised stays in the community, and it is the biggest fundraiser for Rotary. So please get out and support the event.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Only thing to report since last meeting, the Hinton Library Board, we had a robust conversation over our upcoming budget. We definitely took into account council's recommendations in regards to the surplus monies, which be happy to say it was decided at the time, still draft form, but to acknowledge that request and fulfill that request to council. I learned too that because there was more than a year of surplus, but it covers all the surplus that would be accounted for with the staff shortage that we had. So it covers all of that. We've also had a robust conversation as a board as to the remaining dollars that is in the reserves, how they might be spent, and looking forward to share that with council at that time as well. And again, it's just in preliminary stages, but we did have a longer meeting than we normally are used to. And I wasn't able to attend the unveiling of the silhouettes, but I did see the pictures on Facebook and they look amazing. The detail, the different industries that our community represents, they look great. I can't wait to see them up. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huss. Councillor Magoon.
Ja, der Oktoberfest ist sehr gut, Herr Labarge. Sorry, that is about as much as I have left from being a kid. It's mostly gone. But no, it's not often I like to, sort of restate things that have already been said, but yeah, please give those awesome volunteers at the Rotary a break. Go buy those tickets early. That's important. And what a great event. So we will certainly be there. That being said, I want to throw in a couple thank yous. With the resignation of the mayor, there is some additional pressures that people may or may not be aware of. So my first thank you is going to go to our deputy mayor, Mayor Ostashik. It's a tough gig to one day think you're just doing the deputy mayor's job, and then the next, let's face it, you're the acting mayor. So Albert, thanks a lot. There's some work there, and it's appreciated. And then also for our citizens who may not be aware, there's a ton of work that goes into preparing for an election. And again, 2 weeks ago, people were just doing their jobs. And then now all of a sudden it's like, hey, guess what? You have an election to prepare for in a very short span of time. So to administration and our workers, thanks. It's appreciated. We know it's a lot of work in a short period of time. So thank you very much. And with that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. As for myself, as Councillor Magoon mentioned, I have taken over the mayor duties, and one of the ones that I got to do last week was to introduce the art that was created by local artist Judy Rusk, and present that publicly for the first time. There were some mock-ups of what's going to be the final art pieces that wind up hanging on Carmichael Lane and Gregg Avenue. So there'll be 25 of those banners on Carmichael Lane and Gregg Avenue in 5 different designs. They're metal cut banners that I believe are about 6 feet tall. Is that correct? Around 6 feet tall. Anyway, there's 5 of them, powder coated, and they'll be visible along Highway 16. They're really, really nice art. Really, really happy with what Ms. Rusk has produced for that. The Hinton Youth Advisory Council actually helped pick the themes that guided Judy in making those banners. And the themes were active living and lifestyle, nature and flora, industry, and Indigenous imagery. So all the different designs that she came up with fit within those themes. And it's really nice. Really looking forward to seeing those come forward. And I believe they are getting installed pretty quickly this fall, I believe, correct? Yeah, I'm getting a nod from administration, so we can see those pretty quick. And as far as official activities, that's all I've got to report for this week. So we can move on to Chief Administrative Officer reporting. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Chair. As of right now, my main goal is catching up on everything after my vacation, but I do want to thank Ms. Bourbeau for taking the acting role for 2 weeks. It's she jumped at the opportunity. I can tell everyone that. So aside from that, I do want to share something that our Director of Infrastructure shared with me that I think is a really cool story. We have just did a repair on Switzer Drive on our water lines. What we had found was about a loony size hole. And I was told that our estimation is that we've been losing approximately 12 cubes an hour for the last 10 years from that one hole. We have lowered our daily water usage from 6,000 cubes to 5,000, gained an extra 9 hours of reservoir time. So I think that's a great work on their behalf, and wonderful to catch that and address it. So.
Great, thank you for that, CEO Panasic. I do have a couple of questions from council. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, if I can sort of confirm something I had heard in the past, just so citizens know too. This is actually something that has been tested twice in the past. My understanding was essentially for chlorine in that water, because, you know, a citizen might say, well, geez, if it's gone on for that long, how come we didn't catch it? Now, my understanding is that we have tested that water in that area for chlorine to see, well, is this something that came from the town? And it's tested negative in the past. Is that accurate?
Administration.
I would refer that to Mr. McLaughlin.
Through the chair of the rest of council, yes, that is accurate. Anytime we suspect a leak, that's one of the things we do to look for it, is to test for chlorine. However, when the water comes in contact with organics in the soil, that quickly dissipates the chlorine levels. And so even with this one, we had tested it about 3 times in a row before it showed a very small sign of chlorine, which led us to further investigate and narrow in on it.
Okay, Councillor Taylor.
This has been leaking for 10 years. What caused us to catch it this particular year, as opposed to last year or the year before? Because I've heard from people that there's been ice there in past years in winter, so they've been suspicious. But why? What caused us to catch it this year?
Through the chair to the rest of the council. So this spring, water was flowed. We tested chlorine, didn't find any, wrote it off as groundwater. And I assume that that's what happened previous years. It would come to the surface, groundwater, or show up as, start flowing down the road, and then we would investigate it, and then spring thaw would happen, the water would disappear, and wrote it off as groundwater. And so that's what was happening. This time the water started coming to surface middle of summer again, and we're like, well, that gave us even more suspicion, because it wasn't just at that spring thaw time, and that's how we found it.
Just to follow up, I think this might be a good communication story personally. Just my take on it. If you explain why we caught it this year as opposed to other years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas.
Thank you. Just to confirm to that area and others, we've had some digging up of spaces, and they're still waiting to be paved. And I'm assuming, but just to confirm for our residents, that we're waiting on contractors to get those areas cleaned up. Specifically, I'm talking at the bottom of Mountain Street, and then of course the new one on Switzer. Is that the case? Administration.
Through the chair to the rest of the council. Yes, that is the case. We have engaged a contractor to come do the paving that we need to do this year. Waiting on the final date of when to come, but we're hoping that they're going to come by mid-September. There's a number of patches of different dig sites that they need to do. So the one on Schweitzer, the one on Mountain Street, and others. As well as paving the parking lot for the affordable housing project as well. So that we're still hoping to get paved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To CAO, our Hinton Youth Advisory Council were given an action item to name our new street sweeper. Has that naming ceremony taken place?
Administration.
I will look to possibly Karen.
Thank you. Through to council. So it hasn't happened yet. So over the summer, administration tried to recruit some youth to come together, and we weren't able to gather. So the plan is in the works in September.
Alrighty. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Race, Councillor Taylor.
To whoever. What are we doing to sort out the problems that seem to be recurring regarding the Gregg Avenue project as a result of our recent water sewer work? Some of the businesses have had 4 sewage blockages in the last 6 weeks since we finished the work. And they've done video camera footage that indicates a rough edge where there's a join between the town and the business owned pipes. And some of these businesses have a 50-year history of paying taxes in Hinton. So what's the town doing to resolve this issue?
Well, if administration is prepared to speak to that, I could hand it over to admin.
Through the chair to the rest of the council. So yes, there is one business that is experiencing some problems. They've contacted us a couple of times. We've followed up numerous times, and as well as this morning. We were supposed to receive the camera information that Councillor Taylor is talking about, but we've yet to receive that camera information. So we need to see that in order to help make a determination, but we'll work with the business to try and resolve it. We did review the camera information that our contractor submitted to us as part of the project, and we can see no deficiencies in that camera information, but obviously their camera will show it from a different angle. So we will need to see that in order to try and determine the problem.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin.
Thanks.
Council, is there anything further? Seeing nothing. Oh, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thanks. When you were on holidays, I sent some questions regarding a photo radar corner. So I'm just wondering, I don't think I've gotten an answer unless I've missed it. And my concern with that photo radar corner is that's pretty close to our $1.7 million photo radar corner that caused us a big black eye in 2016 and 17. And that's the spot where when folks are coming home from Jasper on a nice Sunday afternoon, we could get $8,000 to $9,000 per hour on a ticket as opposed to $200 in a school zone. So this site has major potential to reactivate an issue that's been lying dormant for quite a while. When might I expect some answers to my questions from August 31st?
Administration.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Taylor. I've been working through my emails. I have seen that you sent them, so I will get on that very soon, but you can expect that those will probably be cleared up by the end of the week.
Oh, perfect. You certainly deserved your holiday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, is there anything further? Okay, seeing nothing further from council. We do have a couple of closed session items. If someone was willing to make a motion, Councillor Haas.
I'd like to move that we go into closed session, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. We could see that motion, please. Oh, there it is. We have a motion that council move into closed session at 6:35 PM. If there's no comments or questions, please vote now. Okay, that's carried unanimously. We will go into closed session with a 5-minute break.